Amen. Thank you, worship team. That was fantastic. Lots of energy, lots of life. We're talking today about Jesus' death and his resurrection. I just realized while we were in worship, actually, that my plant is halfway dead here. Somebody want to run and grab me a cup of water, and we can pour it in there, and then we'll see if maybe it can come back to life by the end of the message here. Today is Easter Sunday, of course, the day we remember, especially the resurrection of Jesus. And so we'll be looking at Psalm 22. We'll be looking at the crucifixion account in the Gospel of Matthew, the account of his death on the cross, and then we'll be looking at the resurrection account. And what we're trying to do in this series as we wrap up, this will be our final message. We've been looking at Matthew off and on, and lots of connections to the Old Testament. We've been looking at that all the way since the beginning of the fall. Yeah, just go ahead and pour it in there. Did anybody else notice that my plant was dying? Am I the only one who noticed? Well, it's my plant, so it's my fault also that it's dying. We've been in Matthew all the way since the fall, and we found lots of connections. Today we'll be wrapping that up, sort of. And as you'll see at the end of Matthew today, it's going to point forward into the future. What's going to happen next with the people of God and how they're supposed to follow Jesus after he's gone. And that's what we'll be looking at starting next week when we move into the book of Acts for the spring. But for today, so we always start with an illustration, our messages, an illustration, so connecting things in the world and in life to the Bible so that we can better understand how the Bible and how to apply it. And so for our illustration today, last week we actually looked at sacrifice in the ancient world and around the world, animal sacrifice, which is was kind of a rough topic, but is powerful because of what we saw. Today we're going to look at this idea of gods and the high God. And I'm going to show you something in this illustration that anthropologists have noticed. Anthropologists are people who study sort of the history of human societies, cultures, and religions. And this is something that has been noticed all over the world. Not necessarily in every single culture or religion, but a large majority of cultures and religions throughout the world. And this is the idea that not only are there gods, you are probably very familiar with the idea that most sort of indigenous cultures or ancient cultures were pagan in a sense. Many gods, right? Many gods that were worshipped, and often those gods are very small in some way. Right? They are gods, local gods, gods of a river or a creek or an area or a particular power in nature. Not really like what we call God today. But what has also been noticed is that many of these cultures and religions, then and now, in the background, kind of hidden behind all these small gods, is almost like a memory of a high God. One God who's above and behind everything. So let me give you some examples. This is an image of Yoruba priests in West Africa today. This particular culture spans several countries in West Africa, partially Nigeria and a couple of other countries. And this culture, like many, especially many in the past, worships many, many different gods, including, very local gods, like I said, trees and streams and rivers and things like that, gods of the mountain. And yet behind all of these gods is this idea of Olorun, who is the supreme creator, the owner of the sky and of all existence. Now that's interesting. It's also interesting because Olorun is almost never worshipped. He is a background deity. All the worship, the different ceremonies that happen are all for the smaller gods that are sort of right in front. The gods that would feel like we could encounter or deal with. It's almost like there's a fear of this god or a sense that he's too far away. We can't get to him directly. And you'll see this. This is the same thing we see in many, many cultures. So some more examples. This is a Lakota sun dance. This is a modern version, modern depiction, or maybe an actual, I'm not sure if it's an actual worship event or a recreation in this case. Could be an actual worship event happening in South Dakota. And for the Lakota people, same thing. You have all kinds of gods. In their case, it's mostly animal spirits that were worshipped. Like buffalo and ravens, different things like this. And then in the background, there is this idea of, I don't know how to say it, Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, who's the creator and unifier of all life. But Wakantanka is almost never worshipped directly. Same thing maybe in pantheons we're more familiar with, right? Like the ancient Greek gods. We talk about them all the time because they're connected to the Bible in some ways, because they're part of that ancient world in which the Bible, many of the stories in the Bible happen. Now you might think, well, there's just a lot of gods. Is there one high God behind everything? And yeah, there kind of is. That's sort of what Zeus is. There were places in ancient Greece and the ancient world where Zeus was worshipped directly, but not most places. Most of the time it was the other gods sort of around Zeus who were worshipped directly. And Zeus was thought of as sort of the father of gods and of men. And he sort of wielded the ultimate power in the background. And in fact, the word Zeus very likely comes from the original word that just meant God. Just meant God. Interesting. And then I'll give you one more example. This is Australian Aboriginal worship. And again, you find the same idea here. Lots of different gods, lots of different spirits anyway that are worshipped. And then in the background, Altjira, the sky god who created the dream time. The dream time is our reality and its eternal order, and who lives above the sky. So in all these religions, and anthropologists have found this in many, many different cultures if you go back far enough, there are all these gods in the foreground, but in the background, it's almost like a memory of one God who's over all and all-powerful. This is Genesis 3:9, and I think this kind of explains why this has happened. This is just the moment after Adam and Eve have sinned. They've disobeyed God. And what do they do right after they disobey God? Do you remember? Yeah, they hide because they suddenly realize they're naked, which isn't just about them being naked. It's also symbolic that they are now afraid. They are ashamed. They have to hide themselves from each other and especially from God. Especially from God. And this is this powerful, emotional moment where God, he comes into the garden and he calls out to Adam. He says, Adam, where are you? Where are you? It's almost as if the whole world is hiding from the one true God. He became so scary to us as a human race at some point that we felt we had to disconnect ourselves from him. He's too much. We had to put him into the background. We're going to see that today as we go through, especially some of Psalm 22, and we look at the story of Jesus' crucifixion, his resurrection from the dead. We are going to see this idea that human beings, it's not so much that we have to come to know God, it's more like we have to remember who he is. Remember who he is. We talk about Christianity, and we talk about it as a religion. That's not totally wrong. It is in some ways a religion, but ultimately it's about the one true God that all people in the world came from. All people in the world knew at one point, and now the world needs to turn back to. And so it's not, following Christ is not a Jewish thing. That was the thing they were caught up on them in the beginning. Is it just this religion for the Jewish people? No, it's not. And today, the thing that many people are caught up, it's sort of a white thing, a white person's religion or a Western religion. It's not. It's not any of those things. It's a turning back to the one true God. And we'll see that today. What we're going to look at the title of the message today, Remember and Turn to the Lord. And we'll do this sort of in 3 parts. I'll remind you a little bit of what we looked at last week. And then we'll look at the story of the crucifixion. And what we did last week, if you were here, or even if you weren't, here's a little recap. We looked at Psalm 22. And Psalm 22 was written 1,000 years before Jesus, before he was born, before his ministry and his death and his resurrection. But it was a prophecy of what would happen to the Messiah, to the chosen one, to the Christ. And we saw a lot of that last week. And we saw also that on the cross, Jesus cries out on the cross. He says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it sounds like he is saying God has abandoned him. His Father has abandoned him. That is not what he's saying. It's not what he's saying, because what he's actually doing is quoting Psalm 22. And so part of the reason we're comparing these two pieces, Psalm 22 and then this crucifixion and resurrection story, is it's going to show us, it's going to take us deeper into what was in the mind of Jesus. What was he thinking about? What was he feeling? What was he focused on as he died on the cross, knowing that he would come back from the dead? And what would that accomplish in the world? So this is a little way of looking deeper into this story. So I'll remind you, last week, Psalm 22, the first half of it was this deep cry for help. And we looked at that and looked at Jesus right before he was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. We said this is how the psalm opens. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish? We talked about last week how this is what we are supposed to do. Not only is it what Jesus was doing in that moment, it shows us his mindset as he went to the cross. But this is what we are supposed to do with our pain. And what we're supposed to do when we feel like this, because we will. When you feel like this in your life, like you've sought after God, you've tried to find him, you've tried to do the right thing, and nothing goes right, and you are in immense pain for whatever reason, whatever God has allowed in your life or has not done, when you feel that way, do not be surprised. This will happen in every human life. What we're supposed to do with that pain is bring it to God in a very raw and real way. So we saw, as we went through that psalm, a number of points. The person in the psalm, which turns out to be the Messiah, it is ultimately a prophecy about Jesus. He is mocked by people all around him. We're going to see that as we look at the resurrection account. People are hurling insults at him, shaking their heads. They say this specifically about him, the psalm says, he trusts in the Lord, let the Lord rescue him, let him deliver him, since he delights in him. People are making fun of the Messiah for trusting God when really human power is going to kill him. You trust God? Oh yeah, what if you die? What if someone comes and kills you? You still going to trust him? This part in Psalm 22, we'll see this come back in just a minute in the crucifixion account in Matthew. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Someone pointed out to me recently that this is an anxiety response, actually. In extreme anxiety, you often can go through, like panic attack almost. You can go through dry mouth. Your mouth can dry up. Jesus is in intense suffering, and this is a prophecy about what that suffering would be like on the cross. Dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircle me. This is all still from that first half of Psalm 22. And then that incredibly prophetic line, they pierced my hands and my feet. 1,000 years before Christ. This is David in worship. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. Okay, so let's look at the crucifixion account. We'll read it, and then we'll point out just all of these places where it is connected deeply to Psalm 22. This is why Jesus cries out in those very words from Psalm 22 as he is crucified. The Messiah, a reminder of why he had to be crucified. In case maybe you're a little bit new to this, you're coming in today and you haven't been part of our series. This is what we talked about last week. This is why he had to die. He had to die to deal with sin. Like we said, the whole world has this memory. All the cultures of the world had this memory that somewhere in the background, there's all these crazy things in life, but somewhere in the background, there's this God who's over everything, but he's too much. We are separated from him somehow. We're distant from him. Something is broken between us and him. What's broken is that we've sinned. We've turned away from him. And that cannot be easily repaired. So the Messiah actually had to come and die to deal with sin, to make a way for us to get back to him. That's what the whole Jesus thing is about. That's what it's all about. So here's the crucifixion account in Matthew. And so as we go through this, just notice not only is Jesus thinking deeply about the Bible, about this prophecy in Psalm 22 as he's dying on the cross, but also Matthew, who was one of Jesus' disciples, as he writes this down later, not a lot later, maybe within 10 or 20 years of the actual event is when he writes this down. As he writes it down, he clearly has Psalm 22 in mind as well. He has thought deeply about what was Jesus saying to me on the cross. So that's what we're trying to do today. Follow, in a sense, in Matthew's footsteps and get into the mindset of Christ on the cross. So this is after his arrest and his trial. He's been convicted. The crowd has forced Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. They've forced his hand. They've threatened to riot in the city unless Jesus is crucified. Pontius Pilate has given in to that request, and now Jesus has been sentenced to death, and he is carrying his cross. He's carrying the cross on which they're going to crucify him to the mountain, the hilltop, where he will be crucified. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. Jesus, at this point, is so weak from being beaten all night that he is unable to carry it alone. And so the soldiers force this apparently random guy. But it's remembered in detail. You will notice throughout this story and in all of the stories of the crucifixion, the writers, the men who saw this and wrote it down, they wrote intricate detail about what happened. The purpose is so that you would know that this is something they saw happen. It's not something they made up later. They don't even know who this guy is. He disappears. He's never mentioned again. They don't know what happens to him, but they know that this is the man who was there at that moment. This particular man, Simon from Cyrene, was forced to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha. This is the hilltop. It means the place of the skull. This is where all the criminals were executed outside of Jerusalem. And many criminals were executed there. There they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. This is because the gall is a bit of a drug in some sense, and it would have dulled his senses in that moment, maybe made it less painful for him, but he refuses that. In the entire story, Jesus is very intentionally entering into the suffering on purpose and as fully as possible. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. So they crucified him, they nail him to the cross. We're not going to go into detail about what that was like today. We've done that other times. I'm sure most of us know exactly what that refers to. They've crucified him. He's up on the cross now. They divide his clothes. So he has one piece of clothing, a tunic, that was on top of his undergarments that's all woven in one piece. And so they don't want to cut it up into pieces, and it's actually somewhat valuable. Clothing in the ancient world was expensive, much more expensive than it is for us today. And so they actually divide this up. They divide it by casting lots. But notice that Matthew, he uses the very words of Psalm 22 to describe this. That is on purpose. And in the Greek text, he is using the exact same words as in the Greek translation of the Old Testament for Psalm 22. The exact same words. So he could have described the event in a slightly different way, right? Like, oh, they threw dice or something. He uses the same words on purpose so that those who really know their Bible, who are looking deeply, seeking after God, will understand what's being said. This was a fulfillment of the prophecy. Sitting down, they kept watch over him there. This is the soldiers. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. It doesn't say it in Matthew. It says it actually in the Gospel of John, but this was written in which languages? Does anybody know? I'll get you guys to engage in a couple of ways this morning. It was written in Aramaic. That's one of the languages. What else? Other languages? It was written in Latin, yes. And it was written in Greek. That's right. Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. 3 languages. And this was, in a very practical way, Pontius Pilate clearly did this so that everybody who was present could read it, which tells you that there were people present who mostly only spoke one of those languages. Interesting. But in another sense, it is symbolic of the whole world, right? So in a way, the Aramaic language was symbolic of sort of the far eastern world at that time. I'll go eastern in this way for you guys. And then Latin was symbolic, Greek was symbolic of the Eastern Roman Empire. That's what they spoke there. And Latin was symbolic of the Western Roman Empire. Interesting. We just watched The Passion of the Christ last night. Anybody remember that movie? Yeah? In this movie, Mel Gibson only has it written in Aramaic and Latin. There's no Greek. He's like anti-Greek or something. That's his Catholic bias. Anyway, I think it is. I don't know why he doesn't put 3 languages. It's crazy. Okay, so this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. So these are the 2 thieves, they're often called, or convicted criminals. They had engaged, it seems like, in some kind of rebellion against the government, some kind of violent uprising. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads. Sound familiar? So again, Matthew is describing the scene, but he's doing it in particular words. He pulls the specific words from Psalm 22. He says, look, all that was happening around Jesus right now, right at this moment, this is exactly what had been prophesied in Psalm 22. And they're saying, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God. Not the exact words of Psalm 22, but very similar. He trusts in the Lord. Let the Lord deliver him. Let him rescue him, since he delights in him. If you really are who you say you are, if you're really that close to God, then prove it right now. Prove it. In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders mocked him. Who are these? Who mocks him in Psalm 22? Who's surrounding him? The dogs. The dogs. The band of wicked, evil men. That's who Matthew here is comparing. He's saying that's the priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders in this particular case. He saved others, they say, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Oh, and here's even more. Here, Matthew again is relating their language in words that sound very much like Psalm 22. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, I am the Son of God. In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. Or maybe I don't know. What do you guys think? The priests and the teachers of the law, are they the dogs or the wicked men? One of the groups is the dogs, and one of the groups is the wicked men. Maybe this is the wicked men. Maybe this is meant to be the rebels, the actual criminals. Maybe that's the wicked men who are surrounding him on either side of him. So now put yourself in Jesus' mindset in this moment. He is suffering. Actually, he's suffering in a way that we cannot possibly imagine, not to its fullness. But even in that moment, he is clinging to the Word of God. He's clinging to the fact that this was planned all the way from the beginning, and it's happening now even as it was planned. And this is what we are also supposed to do in our lives. When it looks like there is no plan, that's not true. When it looks like everything is hopeless, that's not true, because God already knew what was going to happen in your life before the beginning, before you were ever created, before he created the world. He knew what would happen in your life. If you keep your focus on him and remember that he is in control, this is faith. And all things will be brought to work together for your good if you do that. We're supposed to do exactly what Jesus is doing in this moment. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. He's actually on the cross for quite a long time. This took a long time. He seems to be crucified about noon, we see here. He doesn't die until 3 o'clock. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And this is, of course, the first verse of Psalm 22, which we've already talked about. Here he's showing you directly, what is he thinking about? This is what he's thinking about. Have you ever memorized the Bible? You should. Why? So you can get a gold star? No. God doesn't give out gold stars. He gives grace. You should memorize the Bible or take it in deeply. It doesn't matter if you memorize it exactly, because you can use it in times of intense difficulty, just like Jesus did. If he needed to remember Psalm 22 in these moments, how much more do we need to in our own lives? When some of those standing heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Almost no one around him understood what he was saying. Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. Now, this is really interesting. Not in Matthew's gospel, but in the other gospel accounts, I don't remember which one, Jesus actually asks for a drink. Why does he ask for a drink? Because his mouth is dry, and because he's trying to point it out. Jesus is actively fulfilling Psalm 22 as he dies. He is thinking about what will happen to his disciples later, what they will remember from this moment. He is thinking about what was prophesied 1,000 years before, and he is showing them when his mouth gets dry and he's overwhelmed probably with anxiety in that moment, so that his mouth becomes intensely dry. He knows that that's a fulfillment of prophecy, and he wants to make sure that everybody else remembers it, that everybody else knows that that happened. And so he asks for a drink. And it's not until he receives the drink that he allows himself to die. Now leave him alone, see if Elijah comes to save him. When Jesus had cried out in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. He told his disciples well before he died, that it would not be the case that anyone killed him. That no one actually had the ability to take his life from him, but that he would give up his own life. And incredibly, he seems to have had the ability to choose when he would die. He waits until he has fulfilled every prophecy that's mentioned in Psalm 22. And then he decides to die. And he just does. At that moment, the curtain in the temple was torn in two from the top to bottom. The earth shook. The rocks split. This really happened. There were earthquakes when Jesus died. Could you imagine what the Roman soldiers who had executed him, what they felt like in that moment when the earth shook after he died? The tombs broke open. The area had a number of tombs that were cut into the rock. Some of them broke open, and apparently some of those people were raised from the dead. Not permanently, but temporarily. So in the week following, it seems to be the case that Matthew is telling us people in Jerusalem encountered those who had already died wandering around the city. Not as zombies, but as live human beings. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection. They didn't come immediately. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like his resurrection had ripple effects. And one day it will have a great ripple effect, the largest that we can imagine. And he went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those, so these are the soldiers who had executed him, when the centurion and those who were with him, who were guarding Jesus, saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Now we'll just look at Psalm 22. We'll take a look at the second half here, and then we'll read the resurrection account in Matthew and see how those two line up. This is the second half of Psalm 22, and so as we go into this, remember that first half was all about this afflicted one who would suffer beyond imagination. And in the first half of Psalm 22, if that's all there were, it would be incredibly depressing. The Messiah dies in that first half. He's abandoned by everyone. He suffers immensely. There's all these little pieces that Jesus would later fulfill, but there's no hope in that first half. But the reason Jesus is quoting that psalm is, I believe, to remind himself and all of us of the second half of Psalm 22. Because this is how the second half goes. In many psalms, there's this moment where the person who's worshiping or bringing their troubles to God, they've gone to the lowest point. They've gotten angry with God. They've had it out with God. They've poured out their hearts to God. And then there's a moment where they turn. And this is the moment of faith. And I believe Jesus does this very clearly on the cross. Before he says it is finished, he has made this turn. There's a moment where they begin to call out to the Lord in faith. But you, Lord, do not be far from me. You are my strength. Come quickly to help me. You see the faith rising in the psalm. Deliver my life from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of lions. Save me from the horns of wild oxen. Then you can see, here's a hint. The psalm has already said that this person would die. And yet, the one who has died will declare your name to my people. In the assembly I will praise you. All who fear the Lord, praise him. All you descendants of Jacob, revere him, all you descendants of Israel. For he has not despised, the Lord has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not forsaken the one who was dying on the cross. He has not forsaken the Messiah. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. From you comes the theme of my praise in the great assembly. Before those who fear you will I fulfill my vows. And as we move toward the end of this psalm, look at what happens in this psalm. David, who originally wrote this, could not have possibly understood what he was writing. There's no way he understood it. He wrote it under inspiration from the Spirit as he worshiped, but it would not be understood until much later. The poor will eat and be satisfied. Somehow those who've never had enough will finally have enough. Those who seek the Lord will be able to praise him. What does that mean? It means they find him. Somehow things will change in the future. Instead of seeking the Lord and not being able to get back to him, instead of all the families of the nations, all the world having all these ways of worship and animal sacrifice and all these religions where we try to get to God, but we can't get there. He's just a dim memory in the background. Instead of that, things will change and people will seek the Lord and they will find him. And then their hearts will live forever. All the ends of the earth, this is my favorite line in the psalm, by far. Since the first time I ever read this as a new Christian, for some reason it's just gripped me. All the ends of the earth. Not will hear about the Lord for the first time and convert to a religion. No, all the ends of the earth will remember. They will remember what was there at the beginning. They will remember the one who made them. And they will turn to the Lord. And all the families of the nations will bow down before him. And somehow what's being said in this psalm is that somehow the suffering of the Messiah will accomplish this. For dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. It gets even better. The rich of the earth will feast in worship. It's not only the poor who will enter into this new relationship, also the rich. And then this is the part David could not have possibly understood. All who go down to the dust will kneel before him. Those who cannot keep themselves alive. This may be the first, not sure, it could be the earliest clear statement of a general resurrection in the Bible. Somehow, because of the suffering of this one man, somehow one day the result will be that everyone who's died will come back to life and will bow, will kneel and worship the Lord as a result. Posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, for he has done it. What does Jesus say right before he dies on the cross? It is finished. He is not quite quoting Psalm 22. He is almost quoting it. He is saying Psalm 22 predicted he would do it. And on the cross, Jesus is saying, I have done it. It has now been accomplished. All who seek the Lord will find him because of what has happened. All the families of the nations will remember. Not become Christians. I mean, they will do that in some sense. But remember what was always there. We'll finish up just by reading through the resurrection account in Matthew. It's quite short in Matthew, actually. This is what happened on the third day. After the Sabbath, at dawn, on the first day of the week. What day of the week is that? Sunday. This is why we worship on Sunday. At dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake again, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance, the angel, was like lightning. His clothes were as white as snow. Here, those who saw it are struggling to describe what they experienced. They did not expect this, and it changed their lives forever. The guards were so afraid of him, the angel, that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen. The angels don't come to break him out. He's already gone. Come see the place where he lay." The angels come down. I think they show up to look, just like the disciples. I think they came down to watch. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead, and he's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you. So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. This is how I think we're supposed to live our whole Christian lives. As we follow Jesus, we're often afraid, yet we are filled with joy if we know him. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. You remember from a few weeks ago? What are they doing? What are they doing? What kind of worship? The proskuneo. They are bowing down to him as to a god, because he is God. Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." We're going to wrap up with that for today. Let's pray, and we'll continue in worship.